Well, that was really something. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was very loving welcome to Madurai and to this amazing function. It was very humbling when I received the invitation to receive the Oration Award this year. I say that in part because I've so enjoyed coming to October Summit just about every year of the 8 years and being very, very moved by the many presentations that have been given on this day, October 1st, the birthday of Dr. G. Venkataswamy. So I would like to thank the founders and leaders of Aravind for inviting me to come and for, again, this very warm okay. This year is particularly meaningful for me and for many of us in that this is the 10th year anniversary of the passing of Dr. Venkataswamy. We were very fortunate that Aravind created this special day and special series of meetings of October Summit to remember Dr. Venkataswamy and to reflect his many interests in medicine, in eye care, in people, through the various workshops and very special occasions that are held as part of October Summit. I also want to once again thank the founders of the organization and recognize that the organization has grown so much and continues to grow. The leadership bodies within Aravind, the number of hospitals, the number of new people coming in with very important levels of responsibility is always very moving to me and very humbling. As we saw earlier, we've been blessed to have many amazing orators for this special day, October 1. I'm particularly delighted that two of the previous orators, Dr. Pararajasegaram and Dr. Marilyn Miller, are here. We almost had Dr. G.N. Rao with us this evening, but he needed to leave a few hours ago after our workshop on responsible health care. Preparing for the oration itself has really given me a lot of opportunity to reflect on Dr. Venkataswamy, his values, and the many things we did together from a period of 1978 till 2006. I literally had a stack of papers this tall that I could read through that were our correspondence from over those years before email started. And very wide-ranging correspondence, which I then was able to research further just the last few days, spending several hours in Nityata, the beautiful meditation center and conference center and place of remembrance for Dr. Venkataswamy as part of the Aravind campus. Dr. Venkataswamy and I met through the Seva Foundation. We were very fortunate that he heard and responded to the call to come to the United States in 1978 to be part of the founding meeting, which we knew would be focusing on human suffering, starting with prevention of blindness. My own journey with Seva started a few years before the founding in my friendship with the founders, Larry and Girija Brilliant. They had worked in the smallpox eradication campaign in India and Nepal and Bangladesh. And upon returning from that smallpox program, the successful WHO program, they wanted to continue to work together with friends to address other forms of suffering. And it was just my good fortune that the particular country that they wanted to focus their attention on first was Nepal, And my husband and I had just returned from 1 year in Nepal, and this gave us a great opportunity to explore and examine how a group of people from outside the country could be helpful in establishing a blindness program in Nepal. For me, the development of Seva Foundation was very important in that myself, having spent several years in India and Nepal in the mid-70s, I really got quite a negative impression of international development. Originally, I thought I would be interested in applying my skills as an anthropologist to applied anthropology and program development. But after seeing a lot of the programs that were going on in the mid-70s, late 70s, I was quite uninterested in taking part. So to meet a group of people who had worked in smallpox eradication or were inspired by that feat and who wanted to start an organization that would be much more attuned to local needs, to work much more flexibly to address issues, was very appealing to me. And so with that, I became very involved with Seva in helping to plan our first meeting and being among the first volunteers. As with any nonprofit organization, the founders are always the first volunteers. The founding meeting of Seva was a very exciting event. It was one where we were all meeting each other for the first time. The people who came for founding Seva came from many different backgrounds, several different countries, and included some people who later on became very interesting and affected all of our lives, including Steve Jobs, who was one of our initial donors, actually. In addition to having a lot of skills and a lot of interests, most people who were drawn to helping start Seva Foundation also felt some deeply spiritual roots in their interest in serving others. And this was certainly a major motivation for Dr. Venkataswamy, and something that really kept him with us all those years. Immediately after the founding meeting of Seva, Dr. V came to visit me at my office at the University of Michigan. As you heard once or twice already today, I worked with the department that planned continuing medical education programs, and ophthalmology was among the departments I worked with very closely. Dr. V visited me at the university. He wanted to know everything about how we planned these continuing education programs. How did we set the objectives? How did we coach the faculty? How did we get everything organized? And he just had a full hour of questions for me about how we did all these steps. Now, fortunately for me, I had just written a manual on how to plan continuing medical education programs, which I could give to him, kind of like a series of checklists. And it really created a very strong bond between us. So all this time, for about an hour, we were talking about continuing medical education, but something else was going on in the back of his mind. And he, in the middle of a sentence, just said, "Why don't you come and help us study why blind people are not coming in larger numbers to my new eye hospital?" This was just within a year of Dr. Venkataswamy founding the Aravind Eye Hospital. And that he thought to invite me to consider this challenge was very humbling to me and also very exciting. I actually went home that evening. I spoke with my husband. I spoke with our good friends, Larry and Gara Brilliant, and some other Seva friends, and I said, what do you think of this idea of me, stopping working at the university and instead focusing full time on blindness prevention? Dr. Venkataswamy thinks I should do that. And I got very full support from everybody I knew, even my parents. The only one person who wasn't supportive was the chairman of my doctoral committee, because I went in and I told him that although I was deeply into my doctoral studies in one particular subject, having to do with diabetic patient self-care, I let him know that I was now going to need to change my topic entirely and move forward, create a new committee, and I completed the dissertation in record short time. My doctoral dissertation ended up not focusing on barriers to cataract blindness, which Dr. V had originally invited me to do, but instead I focused on one of the needs within the Nepal Blindness Survey, which was to study health beliefs and behaviors regarding blinding trachoma. Dr. Venkataswamy's assistance to Seva and the government of Nepal for the Nepal Blindness Survey back in 1980 and 81 was just immense. I mean, this was at a time when Aravind was rapidly growing. You had a small staff. You were taking on enormous challenges to reach the community, and yet throughout, Dr. Venkataswamy insisted that any expertise Aravind had should be devoted to helping to plan the Nepal Blindness Survey and to help other programs as well. Throughout this period, I did a lot of travel with Dr. V. I really enjoyed being with him because it was so unpredictable. Would you agree? Unpredictable. I never knew what was going to happen, really, as the day went by. We'd always have a plan. We'd have people we needed to meet with. But no matter what, he always made it really interesting with side activities that I'll describe some of. When Dr. V came to the founding meeting of Seva, he listened a lot, he had a lot of suggestions, but he made only 2 requests on behalf of Aravind. He asked for help finding and developing a very good administrator who could help him and his team really build the institution. He also asked for help from an experienced person who could help him design the network of Aravind hospitals. Now, this was back when Aravind had 1 hospital, but he was already planning ahead to how he should lay the groundwork for Aravind having multiple hospitals. And this picture shows the manifestation of the response to Dr. V's 2 requests of Seva at our founding meeting. On the right is Professor Fred Munson, an active Seva volunteer, a very top specialist in the development of hospitals and hospital networks. And Fred Munson agreed to come as a Seva volunteer to Aravind starting in 1980, I think, 81, and has come almost annually ever since. So when we talk about Seva volunteers getting very involved, we really mean it. Fred Munson and his entire family have volunteered in various ways here at Aravind over the years. Also, you'll recall that Dr. Venkataswamy also needed a really great administrator, and it was a series of serendipitous events that brought Mr. Tulsiraj onto the radar screen, And Seva even had Tulsi interviewed by one of the top industrialists of India, a top advisor to Mr. J.R.D. Tata of Tata Industries. And Tulsi passed the interview with flying colors, and we could recommend to Dr. V that definitely working with and bringing in Tulsi in this key role would be effort very well placed. It was Dr. V's humility at the Seva founding meeting, and the fact that although we were talking a lot about money and timelines and other things, for Nepal, when it came to Aravind, he really was looking for resources in the form of skilled people. And that really made an impression on me, because really all the money in the world means so little if you don't have the right people on your team, and if they're not developed to optimize their skills and work together. When we think of Dr. V, we can also think of him as being a very compassionate person. He would be thinking of patients so holistically, so out of the box. I often wonder what would have happened if he had stayed an obstetrician as he had been in his original medical training. I often wonder what would the whole field of safe motherhood look like today if in fact he'd stayed in obstetrics and not shifted into ophthalmology. Dr. V was very concerned about barriers to care. I mentioned earlier his concerns that people were not coming for cataract surgery in the large numbers he had been hoping, and this led to some very painstaking research to determine what was keeping people from coming. Partly, of course, there'd be geographic barriers or fear, but also he came to realize that one of the reasons patients were not coming in the large numbers he would like is that patients weren't really that satisfied with the vision outcome of their cataract surgery. This was back in the days when people were receiving intracapsular extraction with no intraocular lens, receiving thick aphakic glasses that distorted their vision. It made it quite difficult to see. And then Dr. V heard the evidence we developed from the Nepal Blindness Survey that found that after 2 years after cataract surgery in Nepal, 50% of the patients no longer had their glasses. Either they were broken or lost or not being worn just because they distorted the vision too much and weren't regarded to be all that helpful. That finding from the Nepal survey, that fully half of the people who'd gotten cataract surgery were once again blind after two years without their glasses, really made him think a lot about the new incoming intraocular lens and that surgery. This just coincided with Dr. Dick Litwin, who's pictured here while Dr. V is doing surgery. Dick Litwin, a Seva ophthalmologist, implanted the first posterior capsule intraocular lens here in Madurai using extra cap technique. And when Dr. V witnessed the fact that the carpenter who had that surgery could, a week later, go back to being a carpenter with excellent vision, really convinced Dr. V that intraocular lenses needed to be available to everyone. Now, this was back at a time when in the United States, intraocular lenses cost $300 a piece. But Seva had ways to get to the companies and to be able to get large volumes of intraocular lenses donated. And David Green, pictured here with Dr. Venkataswamy, was very active in getting the contributions of intraocular lenses. This was a short-term beneficial activity, but Over time, the demand for intraocular lenses here at Aravind far exceeded what we could possibly get as donations, and getting donations was simply not sustainable. And that led in 1990 to the decision to establish Orolab, which, as I think everyone in the room knows, is one of the world's leading manufacturers of intraocular lenses and many other important consumables, so important to eye care. And Orolab has certainly made it possible for the programs of most of us in this room to be able to reach out and with confidence be able to serve very large numbers of people on a rather affordable basis. So Dr. V was very concerned about barriers to care. He was concerned about quality to care. He also was concerned about caregivers. How would teams of people best organize themselves to offer eye care services? So even when Aravind was so busy with active growth in the early 1980s, Dr. Venkataswamy actively invited teams to come from Nepal, teams whose efforts would build upon the findings of the Nepal Blindness Survey. And often teams such as this one, with one or two ophthalmologists and then the rest ophthalmic assistant candidates, would stay here at Aravind for 1 year of training. In each instance, the two cohorts of people who came went back to Nepal and became very important members of the backbone of the Nepal Blindness Program. But it was the work with these teams from Nepal, the early consultation Aravind gave to the Nepal Blindness Survey led to Nepal becoming the first country outside of India where Aravind could experiment with adapting and applying methods that worked so well here in Tamil Nadu to an entirely different part of the world. This grew into Aravind's assistance in developing many institutions in Nepal, one of them being the Lumbini Eye Institute, which today, with its satellites, does 40,000 surgeries a year. But that work with the teams from Nepal, and the fact that Aravind was getting so many requests from other parts of the world for help with developing country programs, is what led to the thought of developing an Aravind Institute right here in Madurai. And so Seva worked with Aravind in establishing the initial planning process for the Institute. And timing, again, was perfect in that within a year, Lions Clubs International Foundation established the Sight First program and was looking for a flagship project to support, and they selected the Aravind Institute, making it the Lions Aravind Institute of Community Ophthalmology. Anyone who's worked with Dr. Venkataswamy at all knows that he had a real knack for figuring out how anyone could somehow contribute to his efforts to reduce needless blindness. Anyone he met, he enrolled in his army, whether it was meeting people at the American Academy of Ophthalmology or meeting visitors here in India, this being Dr. Marty Spencer, board member of Seva Canada and of Seva Foundation. And he just always had a way of converting anyone's skills and interests into some element of the fight against needless blindness. He would have architects designing collapsible vision lanes to use in screening, day screening activities. I mean, anyone could take part. But he was interested in people also who didn't have a role to play in blindness prevention. He also was very dedicated to his guru, Sri Aravindo, and the mother, and very attentive to the communities of Sri Aurobindo devotees around the world. One in several evenings during that very busy week of IAPB meetings, this family of Indian origin had been living in Kenya by that point for 2 or 3 generations. They knew no one who had actually been personally with Sri Aurobindo. So to be able to be with Dr. Venkataswamy, who had in fact been with Sri Aurobindo, was very meaningful to them. And just about every extra minute we got when we weren't in meetings for the with colleague organizations in eye care, we spent with these devotee families, each one of which, of course, wanted us to come for dinner. So this experience of Dr. V being so expansive, so open, although he had so much to accomplish at that 1-week meeting of the International Agency for the Prevention of Blindness, he was fully willing to drop everything in the evenings so as to be with these devotee families. For several decades, Dr. V came to the States every year for the Seva Foundation meeting, and as Tulsi noted, a lot of effort, a lot of planning went into his visits to the States. And many of us here from the US and Canada today were part of his visiting itinerary of visiting major medical centers and NGOs in North America while he came for the Seva meeting. During the Seva meetings, he got to meet a lot of eclectic people. We met in very beautiful places in different parts of the United States, on the East Coast, the central part of the country, and also on the West Coast. Here we are in front of the Golden Gate Bridge near a meeting spot that we used quite a bit. But the fact that our meetings went for a full week meant that we all had a lot of time to get to know each other. And Dr. Venkataswamy really enjoyed the deep friendships he created on the Seva board and through the body of Seva volunteers. We met in beautiful places, and this particular set of meetings was at Camp Win a Rainbow, the camp run by Wavy Gravy and his wife Johanna Romney, who are still very active with Seva and were very, very strongly committed to Dr. V, his vision, and all of Aravind. After I got to know Dr. V more in his setting here at Aravind, not just traveling or being in the United States together, I came to realize how unique it was for him to be part of the Seva family and to be in the United States with the Seva meetings. He would be in a situation where he wasn't always in charge of everything. He would help cook dinner. He would wash his own dishes. He'd come into a room and everyone did not stand at attention because that wasn't our custom. He could simply be another of the 20 or 30 or 40 people who were meeting that week. And I think it gave him a lot of freedom, and it gave us all a tremendous gift of his presence. Through the Seva meetings, as I noted, he got to know a lot of people who he made a major impression on, and I think they made a major impression on him also. Among them is our friend Ram Das, who's in this picture, along with Mirabai Bush and myself. And Dr. V and Ram Das would travel together a lot in the United States and in India. Ram Das took Dr. V to Ram Das's own guru's ashram in Kanchi. That was the ashram of Neem Karoli Baba. And to this day, there's a very strong connection between members of that ashram and the Aravind family. Dr. V would also accompany Ram Das on retreats meditation retreats that Ram Dass would give in the United States. And again, Dr. V just was so popular at these retreats. Everyone who met him wanted to get to know him better. And among them was our really great friend, Jerry Jones, who immediately saw in Dr. V a person with such compassion, such love, and such amazing energy and ability to make an impact that Jerry, throughout the rest of Dr. V's life, was sure to be very close to him. Through the Seva network, there was a particular donor who was starting an endowed lecture at Harvard Divinity School. And Dr. Venkataswamy was invited to be the second annual speaker for the Harold Witt Lecture on Living a Spiritual Life in a Contemporary Age. For a number of us, we regarded this to be maybe the beginning of Dr. V's third career. He started out as an obstetrician briefly, went into ophthalmology, obviously, and then in the early 90s, perhaps it was partly spending a lot of time with Ram Dass and in retreats, he began to think more consciously about the role of spirit and service in everyday life. And he gave a wonderful talk at Harvard Divinity School. It was so well subscribed, they had to set up television sets in surrounding rooms so people could tune in to his talk live via cable. And those talks have now been written up, and I'm sure you could get a copy of these talks that are referred to as Illuminated Spirit. But Dr. V didn't focus only on these kinds of very heady pursuits. He had a lot of other interests too. For instance, after the Harvard talk, the friends who had arranged the talk for him took him to Boston Commons, and they went, Boston Gardens, and they went to a Dizzy Gillespie concert. And Dizzy Gillespie is a jazz musician who our friends thought he might stay for 20 minutes or maybe want to leave at intermission. In fact, he wanted to stay all night. He stayed till the very end of the last act of the concert. He was so interested in the music. As we've mentioned, Dr. V went to every meeting of the International Agency for the Prevention of Blindness, including the one in Berlin in 1994. Here we are meeting with Mr. Nagarajan in Berlin. And I was really surprised one day when I was looking at our schedule and all the different talks and who was doing what throughout the day, and Dr. V said, "I'm taking you to a museum." And I looked at Dr. Prajna and I said, "What's going on?" And he literally, Dr. V had us get in the bus and go to the Pergamon Museum, a very famous museum in Berlin. He wanted us to see the Greek art there. And he knew the museum because years earlier, he had been professor at Humboldt University in East Berlin, and he wanted to go back and see the university, and he wanted us to see the museum. And you wouldn't believe how surprised Prajna and I were when we heard Dr. V order our museum tickets in German language. Who knew? Another time I'm thinking of Dr. V just being interested in people and interested in what's going on. He was in his office here in Madurai, and he heard that he asked me to find her and bring her to him so he could ask her about the food in Italy and what should he be sure to order to have a really good meal of fresh vegetables. So that nothing about eye care whatsoever. But this relates to Dr. V's great love of people, his family, of course, his many friends, including his friends with Seva. He always loved to spend time with the kids at Seva meetings, and the newest babies who'd been born to Seva community members, and was always interested in what people were doing. He seemed to always know what grade every kid was in school. He seemed to always know what they were studying and maybe what they needed to work on a little more. So he was extremely tuned in at so many levels beyond ophthalmology. In our family, as we heard earlier, Dr. V would stay with us extensive periods of time in Michigan and in California. Here he is with my son Michael back when Mike was 9 years old. And then when Mike was maybe, 18 years old, here as a volunteer in Madurai. And then more recently, Mike came back to Aravind with a team from Harvard to do some study along with Gauth and others on vision center development. I'm also happy to say my daughter, who's here in the front row, first came to Aravind when she was 10 years old, pictured here with Dr. Venkataswamy, and here with Dr. Nachir and Nachir's own granddaughter, Mira, who's of course now quite a distinguished young woman. So throughout this time, I was just always constantly amazed by the breadth of Dr. V's interest, the energy he had, and the way he expressed his love for people in so many subtle ways. During late 2005 and early 2006, Dr. V took very seriously ill. At that time, we were very grateful that he could participate in a meeting that Aravind hosted here in Madurai in March of 2006 for Seva and Seva partners so that we could do some brainstorming together, some reflection, and develop our next big collaborative idea. Well, that next collaborative idea was the Global Site Initiative, which we feel has really been blessed by Dr. V. This was the last meeting he attended, and his spirit definitely has continued to energize this work. The meeting was fantastic. We had partners, many are in this room, from all around the world, and it helped to develop what have emerged into plans to work with nearly 100 eye hospitals to help them improve their practice, their quality, their sustainability. All of this I see very much as in the legacy of Dr. V's vision. Another aspect of Dr. V's vision that came through in the first October Summit was a special course in how to train. This was the IXL course, which Aravind and Seva and the International Council of Ophthalmology have now given 8 times. We've helped more than 90 eye hospitals from 22 countries with 200 team members take on board strategies to either launch their training programs inside their hospital or strengthen their training programs so they could create the human resources required to get the job done. So Mr. Nagarajan is waxing forth here in our most recent IXL, which was just held 2 months ago and will be held again this coming August. Now, for me personally, my own annual participation in IXL is particularly meaningful because to me it takes me back to the roots of how I first met Dr. V when he came to the training center at University of Michigan, and where we could talk about how to empower people, how to equip people to serve patients better through quality continuing medical education. So every time I work with Divya and the team here on developing the next year's IXL program, it also just reminds me of that day at the University of Michigan when Dr. V came and literally changed my life. So I am very happy to have been able to share with you some things about compassion in action and about living a life of service. I would like to shift gears for just a minute before I give up the dais. I'd like to recognize a very close friendship of Dr. Venkataswamy's with one of Seva's founding members, Dr. Larry Brilliant, and let you know that the most recent book in which Dr. V is mentioned is, in fact, the book that Larry Brilliant is bringing out next week. It's called Sometimes Brilliant, and in it he talks about Dr. Venkataswamy. So many more people will be getting the Dr. V message